1986 was unfortunately a mixed bag. We had the triumphant return of one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time, but we were also struck with tragedy as we lost one of the all-time greats. Find out about the best metal of 1986 next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of the Metal Dude Abides. If you've been following us on this journey, you know we're going year by year through the history of heavy metal, and you'll know that we just got through talking about 1985. 1985 was a bit of a soft year, a lull in the heavy metal momentum. The first few years of the 80s were absolutely the best 4 or 5 years in the history of heavy metal. And then all of a sudden, 1985 is kind of a little bit off keel. Well, luckily for us, 1986 comes back to form. What a great year for both hard rock and heavy metal. We've got a lot of bands to talk about, so let's get going. Whenever we talk about the history of heavy metal, we always like to talk about the up-and-coming bands, the newcomers that keep the fuel to the fire going. And this year we have some excellent nominees for Newcomer of the Year. Our first nominee, Cinderella. What a debut Cinderella makes. They come out with their debut album, Night Songs. It is one of the biggest hits of the year. Our second nominee, Crimson Glory. They also put out their debut album this year, the self-titled album, Crimson Glory. This is a bit of a band that you might have missed. They had kind of an odd gimmick. They all wore these really shiny gold masks. Put out a few good albums, though, and this is one of their best. Our third nominee might seem out of place in this category, but we're going to go with David Lee Roth. Now you may ask yourself, how is David Lee Roth a newcomer? The man was in Van Halen for a decade and had put out an EP earlier. But this is the first time David Lee Roth has put together his solo band and has recruited two of the most legendary heavy metal players of all time, guitarist Steve Vai and bassist Billy Sheehan. And they're about to put out their first album, Eat 'Em and Smile, so they get placed in this category as well. Our fourth nominee, band you may not have heard of, Sword. This is a Canadian heavy metal band that came out of the gates firing with a sensational album called Metalized. And finally, our fifth nominee, Tesla. They also put out a debut album called Mechanical Resonance, and it caught the world by storm. A very good album to come out of the gates with. And the winner is? This was a surprisingly close race. If I was just to base it solely on the quality of that first album, I might have to go with Sword. But you could also tell a couple of these bands were having a big impact and were going to be huge stars and had a big footprint right off the bat. So it really boils down to two bands here, Cinderella and Tesla. And I'm going with Cinderella. And the reason is this. Not only did Cinderella have a tremendous album in Night Songs, not only did they have a big presence on MTV with not one, not two, but 3 sensational videos, they also got the slot on the Bon Jovi tour that year. They opened up for Bon Jovi across the United States and got a ton of exposure. Remember, Bon Jovi is the biggest band on the planet right now, and getting that opening slot was a great plum. This was the perfect storm that sent Cinderella from an unknown band to one of the biggest bands on planet Earth overnight. Congratulations to Cinderella. Now, the Grammys that year went with Bruce Hornsby and the Range. Now, I have to say that Bruce Hornsby and the Range is not my style of music, but it does have a certain soothing, relaxing effect. So, for instance, if you're going to go have a root canal at the dental office, maybe this would be good music to play in that situation. Nice, calming music. I'm not going to get too upset about Bruce Hornsby in the range because, trust me, this is the best of the bunch. The Grammys really stinks this year. They have bad selection after bad selection. This is actually the least offensive of the bunch. But I'm also going to recognize that both Cinderella and Tesla, to me, should have won this award over Bruce Hornsby. So I'm also going to say, in the Grammys that year, Newcomer of the Year should have also been Cinderella. Now let's go on to Instrumental Performance of the Year. Our 5 nominees for the Best Instrumental Performance starts with the band Loudness and the song Ashes in the Sky. The guitar intro on this song is so good, so blazing fast. Kira Takasaki is one of the legendary guitarists in the business, and Loudness has hit the United States like a hurricane. Our second nominee comes from the band Megadeth and their song Wake Up Dead. We pointed this out in our last episode about how many of these thrash bands really improved from album 1 to album 2, and Megadeth is no exception. This particular album, Peace Sells, is a huge leap forward and really establishes Megadeth at the front of the line in the thrash metal movement. And this song had a big hand in that. Our third nominee, speaking of thrash metal legends, Metallica with the song Orion. Now, this is the actual first true instrumental song of the bunch. There's no vocals in this. It is legendary. It's also the last great instrumental performance that we're going to have from Cliff Burton. So it's got to be, if nothing else, a sentimental favorite. But when Metallica put together these epic instrumentals, they were always worth the price of admission. Our fourth nominee, The Stranger, by Tony McAlpine. I'm not sure how to say this gentleman's name. I got really lucky back in the day. Just on a whim, bought this man's album. It is an absolute barn burner. I would say, think about Joe Satriani with a little more soul, a little more grit to his music. Really love this. I don't believe this carried forward much. You don't hear his name much. But if you want, go back and listen to this guy. He is unbelievably good. And surprise, surprise, our fifth nominee, none other than Yngwie Malmsteen with Trilogy Suite Opus number 5. It's always hard to remember all of these, classical passages that Yngwie is playing, try to get all that correct. Yngwie has won this award the last 2 years. So he's going for the trifecta this year. I do not believe that anybody has pulled down this award 3 years in a row. Let's see if Yngwie can pull it off. And the winner is? There will not be a three-peat this year. The record stays intact. The winner? Megadeth for their song, Wake Up Dead. There's a couple reasons I picked this song. Number one, that riff. So heavy, so catchy. This is really a step up from Dave Mustaine and the boys. This was also the riff that was so good, it became the intro. If you go all the way back to the 90s, Headbangers Ball, this is the riff that they used to bring in the show every week. It is that iconic. And finally, not only does it have the great riff, it has a tremendous guitar solo. So congratulations to Dave Mustaine. This entire album is fantastic. His playing is out of this world. It took a lot to knock Yngwie off the top. Congratulations to Dave Mustaine. Now, the winner the Grammys chose that year was a band called Art of Noise. And they did a cover, if you will, of the classic Peter Gunn song. Now, Peter Gunn was from the gangster movies back in the day. How do I describe Art of Noise? Well, let me just say this. In the 1980s, while the music was great, the art from that era was pretty abysmal. There was just a lot of vulgar art. There was a lot of people running around smearing poop on the wall saying it was art. Hey, let's put pee in a mason jar and call it art. It was kind of, a very talentless era for art. And Art of Noise kind of falls into that, where it's like, look, art for the sake of it being artsy fartsy, but not because it's any good, right? No one really cares about, Art of Noise. They were just kind of this kind of hip thing that, kind of like the galleries were in the big cities. People would walk around with their wine and, oh, isn't this beautiful? It's feces spread on a wall, right? Not really anything that would last. And, as it turns out, Art of Noise, no one's heard of them in decades. So not only am I going to give Megadeth the win for best heavy metal instrumental, I'm also going to say best rock instrumental across the board. Now let's go to best vocal performance. Our 5 nominees for best vocal performance of 1986 are as follows. Black Sabbath, Heart Like a Wheel. Black Sabbath is now going through ex-lead singers of Deep Purple. This one has to do with Glenn Hughes. Now, I will say that this album, 7 Star, is a bit of a controversial album in the Black Sabbath catalog. Tony Iommi was originally going to do this as a solo project, but the record label made him go back in and make this an official Black Sabbath album. This is not really, in my humble opinion, a heavy metal album. It's much more of a hard rock album. And if you view it from that lens, it's actually pretty good. If you're expecting Black Sabbath, though, it comes off as a bit of a disappointment. But what's not disappointing is Glenn Hughes' phenomenal voice, and he really does a great job on this song. Our second song comes from Cinderella, Nobody's Fool. Boy, we talked about the fact that they had a great album, great videos, great opening slot with Bon Jovi, but let's not get past the headline here. Tom Kiefer had a legendary voice. I really like his voice. I really like the voice that have that kind of growl and grit to him. And Tom Kiefer really leans into the growls and the grit on this bit of a ballad. Nobody's Fool, our second nominee. Our third nominee, Brucey's back, ladies and gentlemen. Iron Maiden with Stranger in a Strange Land. Iron Maiden was one of the bands that was absent last year. We missed them greatly. They are back, and they are sounding better than ever. Our fourth nominee, another legendary performer, Judas Priest, their song Out in the Cold. I am a known hater of the album Turbo, but I have to give, this song its due. This song is fantastic. Once again, a ballad for Judas Priest. This song was so good. This song is what they opened up on their Turbo tour with. It is an all-time catchy number. And finally, Queensryche is also back. Jeff Tate comes in with another phenomenal vocal performance in the song Walk in the Shadows. And the winner is Iron Maiden, Stranger in a Strange Land. This is the second time that Bruce Dickinson has brought home the prize. He won it back a few years ago for his performance on Hallowed Be Thy Name, and he brings home the prize here. Stranger in a Strange Land is a little bit of an underrated Iron Maiden album, but it's always been one of my favorites, and the biggest reason why is I believe in the entire Iron Maiden catalog, this album right here is where Bruce Dickinson sounds his absolute best. Not sure what was in the water that year, but Bruce Dickinson, just song after song, does amazing work on this album. Congratulations to Bruce Dickinson. If you've never heard this album, go back and check it out and pay close attention to the vocals. Bruce Dickinson puts on a legendary performance. Now, the Grammys that year went with a pretty uninspired choice, if you ask me. Robert Palmer for the song Addicted to Love. If you look up style over substance in the dictionary, you'll probably flip over and see a picture of Robert Palmer. This song was a real nothing burger, really. It had just a very simple beat, nothing to it, just kind of repeating the same lines, very pop type of stylish thing. And the only reason anybody liked it is because in his video, he had 4 gals in these really tight dresses dancing to the music, with this kind of very modern, their hair was all pulled back tight and they had like real pale makeup on. Anyway, this would have been a song nobody paid attention to except for the video. And so Robert Palmer, move over. Bruce Dickinson not only is going to win Vocalist of the Year in the heavy metal department, but across the board in the rock department as well. And one other note, this is also the year that the heavy metal community came together and put their album Hearing Aid together, and in particular, the song Stars. Now, we talked about that just last year. In 1985, the rock community came together and did a big Aid for Africa and concert tour and put out a song for charity, and they didn't invite any of the heavy metal bands to participate. So the boys from Dio, Jimmy Bain and Viv Campbell in particular, decided, hey, let's do a heavy metal version of this. And here it is, Hearing Aid, Stars. Now, I kind of, made fun of the Grammys for nominating that, We Are the World song for Song of the Year last year. So I'm not going to make the same mistake here. Stars is not really a fantastic song in any way, but it does have legendary singer after legendary singer perform on it. So if you want to go back and listen to it, it's got Dio, it's got Halford, it's got Jeff Tate, it's got Don Dokken. It's a virtual who's who of vocal geniuses. So while I'm not going to go and nominate it because it's not a really great song, I will recognize the unbelievable voices that sing on this. There's also some pretty good guitar solos mixed in there as well. So if you have never heard our version of the charity, a number, go back and check it out. And I always did laugh at the name because there was Aid this, Aid that, and with the heavy metal being loud, we get Hearing Aid. Hilarious. Now let's move on to the best songs of 1986. As is our tradition, let's start with the best hard rock songs of 1986. We start with the return of AC/DC. Who Made Who? For those of you who weren't around in the 80s or didn't really follow the career of AC/DC, AC/DC was the biggest band on planet Earth back in 1980 with the phenomenal album Back in Black. But they had kind of hit the skids a little bit, starting with Flick of the Switch, Fly on the Wall, etc. They had kind of fallen out of favor. And then all of a sudden, they put out this single, Who Made Who, that was part of a soundtrack to, I believe the movie was called Maximum Overdrive. Might have been based on a Stephen King movie. But all of a sudden, because not only did they put out the single, they kind of put together the soundtrack for that and went back to a lot of their old classics. And after 4 or 5 years of this point, not a lot of people remembering the greats of AC/DC, all of those songs came firing back, and AC/DC returned to being one of the biggest bands on planet Earth. In particular, just as a side note, they did a video finally for the big hit from 1980, You Shook Me All Night Long. If you've never seen that video, you have to go check it out. Brian Johnson going out on a date is one of the funniest videos you'll ever see. The second song, Bon Jovi with their song Wanted, Dead, or Alive. Bon Jovi, whether you love him or whether you hate him, was the biggest band on planet Earth, and it was rightfully deserved. This album that this song came from, one of the best hard rock albums of all time. And Wanted, Dead, or Alive, even the most thick-skinned heavy metal guy had to go, yeah, that's a pretty good song. Our third nominee, Cinderella. We talked about the song Nobody's Fool. Tom Kiefer sings the heck out of this power ballad with so much grit. One of my all-time favorite songs from Cinderella, and one of my all-time favorite ballads, believe it or not. Our fourth nominee is a little bit controversial in my own heart. Europe with The Final Countdown. Wow, this song has, when it first came out, it was like, this is great. Then you got real tired of it real quick because it was being played everywhere. But then recently, I'm wearing my AEW threads today, was in Vegas, happened to see, I think this show in particular, Double or Nothing, and they had a match called Mayhem in the Arena, Anarchy in the Arena, excuse me, Tony Khan, and Bryan Danielson was involved in that match, and so when he came out and they started playing The Final Countdown, the arena in Las Vegas erupted. So even though this song, I got a little tired of it, it's kind of wormed its way back into my heart. One of the all-time greats. Our fourth nominee, Europe, with The Final Countdown. And finally, Tesla, with their song Modern Day Cowboy. A lot of big hits off that first album from Tesla, but by far, this was my favorite. And the winner is Nobody's Fool by Cinderella. Once again, Cinderella, what a debut. Obviously a band no one had ever heard of, to all of a sudden, by the end of this album and that supporting tour with Bon Jovi, they had established themselves as one of the biggest bands on the planet. I have always had a soft spot for this tremendous ballad. Tom Kiefer's voice is off the charts. Came very close to winning Vocal Performance of the Year for this song. This was almost a double winner, folks. That's how much I love this song. Now let's go over to the heavy metal song of the year. Our first nominee, Iron Maiden, with their song Wasted Years. Iron Maiden has been putting out banger after banger after banger, and this is no exception. Wasted Years is one of their absolute best songs, and that's saying a lot when you think of all the great songs Iron Maiden put together. Maybe the last great song with Adrian Smith at guitar. Our second song, Peace Sells, but who's buying? Megadeth. Love this song, love the political commentary. I always cracked up because they had a video for this, and the kid's watching TV or whatever, and his dad comes in and says, turn this music off. I want to watch the news. And the kid looks at him. This is the news, really cheesy, but, we loved it anyway. Great song, great bass on this song that really just gets you going into the mood. And Dave Mustaine just snarling the whole way through. Love this song to death. The third song, Metal Church, Watch the Children Pray. I absolutely adore Metal Church. I absolutely adore their first two albums. Maybe my favorite album of theirs has to be this, the second one. This song really highlights the power of Metal Church. I would say again, this was a bit of a ballad, but it is so unbelievably heavy. An absolute classic. All right. My fourth nominee is going to be a little bit of a hot take because we're going to go with Metallica, but it might not be the song you think because I'm going with Sanitarium, Welcome Home. I know, Master of Puppets is an unbelievable song. It was very popular then. Metallica rises to power a few years later, becomes popular again, and then just recently, because of the television show Stranger Things, Master of Puppets becomes on the charts again. But my favorite song on this album, and it's not even close, Welcome Home Sanitarium. Now, if you like Master of Puppets better, you can just slide it on right in here, because that's the thing about Metallica. Every album they're putting out at this point has one or two songs that could easily be not just the best song on the album, but the best song of the year. That's the kind of role Metallica's on right now. And finally, Queensryche with Walk in the Shadows. Jeff Tate's voice is an absolute ticket that you have to see. Queensryche is really building up. Every album gets a little better, and their songwriting and craftsmanship just keeps improving. And the winner is? Mirror stares back hard. Kill is such a friendly word. Seems the only way for reaching out again. Metallica, Sanitarium, Welcome Home. Maybe my favorite Metallica song of all time. What an absolute barn burner. And I love that part of the song where it kind of, I don't know, I always use this. I don't know if I use this properly all the time, technically. There's kind of like a breakdown in the song where it kind of flips over into the chorus and they kind of go into this verbal interlude. And then Kirk Hammett's guitar solo just erupts. It just sends shivers down my spine every time. I've been listening to this song for 40 years. Still has a huge impact. What a unbelievable song. But again, if your song of the year is Master of Puppets, feel free. That's a really good song as well. Now, the Grammys that year, they went with a song called That's What Friends Are For with Dionne Warwick. Now, once again, we just got through talking about this the other day, where you get a bunch of musicians together, legendary performers, and you throw them into a song, and then all of a sudden, it's going to win Song of the Year. All right, fine. This song has Dionne Warwick. It's got Gladys Knight, I believe. It has Stevie Wonder and has Elton John. 4 legendary performers. In kind of a nothing burger of a song, if you ask me. Like, those 4 people's talents are a little bit wasted on this one. It's a little bit of a meh song to me. Now, here's where I'm going to get in on a little bit of a rant. I didn't mention it earlier because it seemed more apropos here. But the Grammys also that year gave Tina Turner Best Female Vocals of the Year for the 3rd year in a row. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know I didn't think she should have won it 2 years ago. I didn't think she should have won it last year, and I definitely don't think she should have won it this year. And here's my beef with all this. Tina Turner on her best day does not have the pipes of Dionne Warwick. Dionne Warwick is why Whitney Houston has those same pipes, right? That's hereditary, people. Dionne Warwick, not my favorite singer of all time, not because I don't like her music necessarily, but I'm not going to deny one of the all-time greatest singers of all time. So this is the kind of logic that I just don't understand from the Grammys. You just said the best song of the year is this song, That's What Friends Are For, sang by Dionne Warwick. Dionne Warwick is a tremendous singer, but you're not going to give Dionne Warwick Best Female Vocals of the Year? You obviously like the song. You think it's great. She's got a better voice than Tina Turner. See, this is the kind of logic that gets the Grammys in all sorts of trouble. At the same time, I've started to mention this new category that they're starting to move into called Best Rock Performance. And the reason I mention it is because it's the harbinger for Best Metal Performance, is what we get today. So they don't say this is the best song or this is the best album. They say this is the best performance, whatever. So that year they picked the Eurythmics with their song Missionary Man. Now, I might quibble a little bit with Missionary Man being all that in a bag of chips either. But once again, if you think this is such a great song that it's going to win Rock Performance of the Year, and it's sung by Annie Lennox, who does some unbelievable vocal work on this song, We're still going to go with Tina Turner? In fact, if I remember right, Annie Lennox and Dionne Warwick don't even get nominations. This is the kind of weird logic that leaves you scratching your head to wonder, do the people who vote on the Grammys have ears? That's the thought that I ponder every once in a while. All right, enough of all that. Let's go to the best hard rock and heavy metal albums of 1986. All right, best hard rock album of 1986. Our first nominee, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. Whatever your opinion is of Bon Jovi, and he's got both detractors and fans, this is by far the magnum opus of the Bon Jovi career. Slippery When Wet, our first nominee. Our second nominee, it's kind of a repetitive pattern here, but Cinderella is back with their debut album, Night Songs. So cool to see young bands coming up and knocking it out of the park on their very first album. Our third nominee, also one of those beginning bands, David Lee Roth, has put together this great ensemble of characters and put out the album Eat 'Em and Smile. Not only a fantastic album, but has some hilarious accompanying videos. The fourth nominee, Rat, Dancing Undercover. A quick funny story about this. Rat is really one of the biggest bands on planet Earth. Their first two albums are legendary. But if I'm being completely honest, I wasn't a big Rat fan. They were okay, but there was nothing that I was really intrigued about. And then they come out with this third album, Dancing Undercover, and I start really liking Rat. At about the same time, the rest of the Rat population starts to decrease. Like, the next two albums from Rat are not nearly as popular as their first two, but I actually think their third, in particular, and their fourth album are their best. Go figure. And finally, our last nominee here, Tesla, with Mechanical Resonance. I think it's so cool that when you look at this hard rock category, you see three brand new bands getting nominations. Keeping heavy metal and hard rock alive with new bands all the time is so encouraging. And the winner is Slippery When Wet, Bon Jovi. Listen, a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, Bon Jovi was only popular because he was a good-looking dude with a great, head of hair. And there's some truth to that. I think him and Sebastian Bach both fall into you're too pretty to be in the heavy metal genre kind of category. So they get a lot of grief for how, pretty they are. And Bon Jovi's hair was the stuff of legend. But let me just put a case in here for this actually deserving the award on its merits. Sure, Bon Jovi always had the hair, but he came back a few years earlier and put out the album, Runaway, right? A pretty big hit for him. You could see Bon Jovi, it was played on the radio a lot. You could see Bon Jovi was on the verge of stardom. And then their second album, Fahrenheit 7800, or whatever it was an absolute flop. It was a disaster. Nobody cared. And he had the locks then. So when he put out Slippery When Wet, it was the music and the look that propelled him. But don't conflate the two, because again, as sexy as that man was, he couldn't sell anybody on Fahrenheit 7800. This album is what did the talking. And one other thing, I already talked about Wanted Dead or Alive being one of the best songs of all time. Let's be honest. This is the impact this man had on the culture. If you say to someone, even to this day, 40 years later, hey, you're halfway there, some idiot's going to jump in and sing the chorus, oh, living on a prayer, because you can't resist that urge. Now let's go on to the Granddaddy Award, Heavy Metal Album of the Year. What a loaded card. Our first nominee, Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time. I already talked about how great Bruce sounds on this album. Let me just say, Steve Harris, bass work on this album in particular is out of this world. Maybe if it weren't for the fact that Cliff Burton was still around, this would be the best bass playing on any album released that year. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. And quite frankly, not trying to make Iron Maiden fans mad at all, but this is really the last great Iron Maiden album with Bruce Dickinson. It is legendary. Our second nominee, Peace Cells by Megadeth. Once again, the jump that Megadeth takes from Killing Is My Business to Peace Cells is unbelievable. This, it may not be their best album. I think that is to come in a few years. We all know the big albums that are coming up. But from just a sound quality album, there's so much depth to the sound on this album. The producer of this needs chef's kiss because it really brought the heaviness out of Megadeth. A sensational album that really sounded, if you look, just listen to the sound, a little bit ahead of its time from a production point of view. The third album, The Dark by Metal Church. My love of Metal Church is legendary. These first two albums are great. This just happens to be my absolute favorite. Very underrated. This is one of those bands that for whatever reason it never quite translated, because even as after this they're going to switch singers and they're still going to be really good for a very long time. Never quite understood why this band didn't catch on, but if you have never heard this band, you need to go back and find them. Our fourth nominee, you knew it had to be here, Metallica with their opus Master of Puppets. Go back a couple weeks, I talk about the greatest album of all time, may be Metallica's Ride the Lightning. But it's 1A, 1B, folks, because Master of Puppets is that good. One of the all-time great heavy metal, thrash metal, you name it, metal albums of all time. And finally, maybe a little bit of a surprise here, but Sword with this album Metalized. One of my favorite albums of all time. Really kind of very lucky that I found this band. Very underground heavy metal band out of Canada. The only reason I discovered this band, I got out of college and I moved to Grand Junction, Colorado. They had a college radio station that would play heavy metal music on the weekends, and they were playing the song Stoned Again, and I just fell in love with that song. Went out, got the album, loved the entire album. Another interesting point with Sword, just, one of those things where you get on the internet, you get on Spotify, and you find out all sorts of things. They then put out a second album, maybe a year or two later, called Sweet Dreams, and then broke up, disappeared, never made another album again, ash heap of history, etc., etc. So I get on Spotify, because I was like, I haven't listened to this album in a while, and I don't dig out my old albums, I just put them up on Spotify. And lo and behold, Sword came back in 2022, folks. I mean, we're talking, there's gaps between albums, but, that's like 34 years, give or take my math here, from the time they did Sweet Dreams to Sword 3. And I gotta say, Sword 3, really good, and I would have completely missed it, except for the fact that I'd gone back when this year came in. I'm like, I'm going to go listen to that Sword album again, and just happened to stumble upon a third Sword album. Really good stuff. I always love discovering new music and maybe albums from a band that I thought was long gone. And the winner is Master, where are the dreams that I've been after? Promised only lies. You knew it had to be. Listen, nobody can touch Metallica in the 80s. Nobody. You cannot find two better albums back to back than Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. Unbelievable stuff. We talked about the fact that I love Sanitarium. Obviously, the title track, Master of Puppets. There's the great instrumental, Orion. Um, Another unheralded song. You don't really hear a lot in the Metallica world, but The Thing That Should Not Be, ooh, is that another good one. Anyway, this is a runaway, folks. I love all the albums I just talked about, but it has to be Metallica. Unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier in the show, this would be our last album with Cliff Burton. Rest in peace, brothers. What a phenomenal bass player. What a horrific loss for the heavy metal community. I don't know that Metallica ever truly recovered from this. I always felt bad for Jason Newsted stepping into those shoes because Metallica never got over this, even to this day. And so I think it's really cool that to this day Metallica is still, making music, selling albums. They're the biggest band on planet Earth, and they're still giving royalties to Cliff Burton's dad, who still follows the band and everything. Just about brings a tear to your eye every time you think about it. But I won't go into all of the tragedy. Just know that it was a huge loss for the metal community. Cliff was one of, I did a special a few weeks ago, the Mount Rushmore of bass players. In just 3 short albums, Cliff Burton established himself to be in that top 4 category of bass player. What a legendary performer. We miss you every day, Cliff. Now, the Grammys that year, oh boy, Paul Simon, Graceland wins Album of the Year. Now, this might sound kind of ridiculous for someone who runs around calling himself the metal dude, but I love Simon and Garfunkel. Some of the most beautiful music you're ever going to hear. Really loved it. And there's a lot of people who like when Paul Simon broke up with Art Garfunkel. Paul Simon went on to have a robust solo career. Let me just say, I can't stomach Paul Simon's solo stuff. He's got a song on this album called You Can Call Me Al. I don't know what the hell that's supposed to mean, but it is one of the absolute stupidest songs I've ever heard. He is, I think, a talentless buffoon. I think all the talent was in Art Garfunkel, but somehow, remember what I was telling you in the 80s? We kind of got off in trash art. We kind of got into some, like Paul Simon just became hip for whatever reason. Chevy Chase was in his video. But, I always thought when you hear the song, You Can Call Me Al, I always go back to that famous line from The Jerk. Don't call that dog Al. Call that dog shithead. That's what I think of Paul Simon. How about that for a closer? So not only should Master of Puppets won Heavy Metal Album of the Year, they should have won the Album of the Year. There is not a single album in 1986 that has had the impact of Master of Puppets. Just got through talking about it. It was big then. In a couple of years, Metallica's going to explode. It's going to be big then. Throughout their career, it has remained one of the biggest albums of all time, and then shows up on Stranger Things and becomes big all over again. With all due respect to any artist from 1986, you're behind Metallica. They're the best on planet Earth. And that's our episode. Obviously, we're going through year by year, through all the great music. Next year will be in 1987. Stay tuned. Join us for that one. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.